Great week. I hope you had a great weekend. Make sure to check out tonight's episode. We're going to have a good time. We got Darren Beattie from Revolver News. We're going to go down the rabbit hole on so many things with Darren because, frankly, there's a lot to discuss. Darren's been one of the guys that has literally broken all sorts of news, gone and done the stories that you'd think everyone in journalism would actually be really interested in, all of the things that actually matter that our mainstream media is just totally ignoring and forgetting. Guys, make sure you're hitting the like button. Make sure you share. Make sure you subscribe. Let's keep getting the message out there. We're up against so much. The rest of big tech is stacked against us, so we have to work even harder to make sure that we break through all of the noise and actually grow this movement. Also, folks, remember, you can go to Spotify, you can go to Apple Podcasts. If you missed the show here on Rumble, it's there. Let your friends know if they get their podcasts that way. Send them the link to Triggered on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. They can check it out. And again, we can help get that message out. You can now even watch the show on your smart TV by downloading the Rumble app and watch Triggered with the whole family. It's a family-friendly show most of the time. Maybe I let a word or two slip every once in a while, but we live in the real world, and so that's okay. But remember, you can watch it on the big screen in your home, whether you have Roku or any one of those. Download the Rumble app there, check it out. That's a great way to view so much of what you're not going to see from the mainstream media, so much of what you're not going to see in big tech or frankly, even on conservative, loosely speaking, conservative TV programming. But first, a quick word from some of our brave sponsors. Like the Wellness Company, guys, a leading provider in emergency medical kits. We saw with COVID, supply chain chaos, lockdowns, Fauci failures, all of it can make it harder to get the medicine that you need for your family in a time of crisis. And we have another brand new product, the Contagion Emergency Kit. This kit provides you with a carefully selected assortment of effective medications for COVID-19 and other respiratory illnesses. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, and so much more. So you can rest easy knowing that you have the emergency meds on hand, along with a guidebook for safe and easy use. So to get this and take care of your family, go to twc.health/triggered, like the Wellness Company, twc.health/triggered, and get 15% discount on all of their medical kits. Again, twc.health/triggered, get 15% off and take care of your family. But guys, do not stop there. Check out the Tax Network USA, okay? Just Tax Network USA, where you can reduce, resolve, and settle tax disputes with the IRS, along with hiring thousands of new agents and field officers. The IRS kicked off 2024 by suspending and sending over 5 million pay-up letters to those who have unfiled tax returns or balances owed. Don't waive your rights and speak with them on your own. They are not your friends. Okay, this is good advice. Okay, the Tax Network USA folks are a trusted tax relief firm. They've saved over $1 billion in back taxes for their clients, and they can help you secure the best deal possible. So whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they can help you. Whether it's business or personal taxes, they can help finally resolve your tax burdens once and for all. So visit TN, like Tax Network, TNUSA.com/Don Jr. for a free consultation. Again, like everything else, hear them out and learn. For a free consultation, again, that's TNUSA.com/Don Jr. So we have Darren Beattie tonight. We're going to talk about the assassination. We're going to talk about the installation of Kamala Harris. We're going to talk about the media and their magical bait and switch, the erasure of her history as the most radical left-wing person in the United States Senate. All of the things that were true a couple of weeks ago are magically erased. We saw a 3-week period of time where our media was finally being somewhat honest, but they were being somewhat honest about Joe Biden when they knew it was over, when they knew he couldn't win. So they were honest to try to effectuate a goal, which is to implant someone else other than Joe Biden, because they knew with him it was over. We're going to get into all of those details with Darren right now, all the things the media is not telling you. At this point, I'd say it may be a bit conspiratorial. At least that's what the media will say. If you've been watching for the last 8 or 10 years, you'll realize this is actually called reason and logic. So Revolver News founder, Darren Beattie, coming up right now. I think we're going to have a great time, and I think we're going to get to a lot. What's going on, buddy? You hear me?
Yes. How are you?
I'm doing well. Look, the hair looks good, bud. I saw you, make that's perfect,
I gotta look good for prime time
Yeah,
here.
you got the opposite of the Trump hair, Darren. It's now, if I don't do anything, my hair goes like full Ronald McDonald. So, the struggle.
Yeah, I'm somewhat notorious for having wild hair, so I try to tame it to the degree I can.
I say you just own it. Just go for it.
There
It's
you
like,
go.
don't make fun of my father's hair because you never know. Maybe the power lie.
Exactly.
Well,
Great,
good to
great
have you back.
speech at the convention. Great
Oh, thank
speech at
you.
the convention.
Yeah, it was there was like four iterations, right? There was the sort of fire speech that I started with, and then, after the shooting, everything changed a little bit. And so,
Yeah.
I went a different route. And then it was I was so proud of my daughter who called me, a day, 2 days before, I was going to speak. And she's like, hey, I want to speak at the convention. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, she's like, well, I spend so much time with grandpa. I'm sick of this crap. And like, it's sort of amazing how someone who's, otherwise basically, apolitical,
Right.
was just, sick of the lies that she has
Right.
seen, throughout her entire childhood, and was just like, you know what? My first speech ever is going to be in front of like 40,000 people.
No big deal. No pressure.
And no
No,
problem.
but
Are you
she did
sure? She's like, I
great.
got this, Dad. I was
Yeah.
like, I called my dad and I'm like, what do you think? Like, I would never throw her out there on my own. Like, it's not a good political, because that could go really wrong really fast. And, these clowns on the other side and the media, and we'll get into that shortly, but, they'd have no mercy, even if it's a, young teenage girl. It doesn't matter, right? She's
Right.
not a 50-year-old Hunter kind of child. It's different. She
Right.
wouldn't get that. And so he's just like, you know what? That kid's a winner. Let her do it. She's going to crush it. And she did. So I was super psyched.
Awesome. Yeah, it
Well,
went
we've been
great. It
chatting
went great.
already a little bit, but joining me, obviously, founder of Revolver News, Darren Beattie, always a crowd favorite. Now, Darren, this is actually a perfect sort of episode for what we've been watching over the last couple of weeks, right? All of the, I don't want to say conspiracies anymore, because at this point, like, the conspiracy is just like logic. The conspiracy is at this point common sense, at least according to the media. But we saw the Secret Service director on Capitol Hill last week. They had zero answers for any of the lapses in security in Butler, Pennsylvania, where my father was shot. Since it seems to be something that they're already trying to get out of the media, they're trying to pretend like it never happened. J6 gets like 3 years of whatever. A grandmother with a selfie stick gets 3 years of attention, and it's the greatest threat to democracy. But a literal assassination attempt of the leader of one of the two largest parties in America, the at the time presumptive nominee, now the actual nominee of a political party in America.
Yep.
What's going through your mind as you've been watching this? You're the guy that sort of led the story on the J6 pipe bomb that magically also disappeared from the news. It's almost like they have other intentions if they don't get what they want out of the thing, and they're trying to move on. It had to be, though, that testimony from the Secret Service director, who's now resigned, thank God. It had to be the worst or the dumbest, most incompetent public testimony in modern American history. What did you make of all of that?
The whole thing really is astonishing. And I think we have to begin with simply noting how miraculous it was that Donald Trump survived. I mean, that was so close, and with something just so crazy like that, it's hard for people to digest. And I still think the American public hasn't fully digested how close it was and what the consequences would have been had it gone in a different direction.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to fully digest that. And then when we move from that to all of the crazy circumstances surrounding how that close call actually transpired. Yes, the Secret Service, Cheadle, she didn't have any answers. Her arrogance was almost as offensive as her non-answers. I guess they're connected. I couldn't believe how arrogant she was. But these are the kinds of bureaucratic creatures that increasingly run our entire society. It's just cover your ass, no comment, pass the buck, zero sense of accountability. You almost wonder how differently would it have to go? Like, how bad would it have to be before she would have considered resigning? It's like, it doesn't get much worse than that. But there really couldn't have been any answers. When you think about everything that transpired, what answers could she possibly have given? What
other than the obvious, which I don't think I don't think even the deep state is quite ready to talk about yet. But like you are on the leading edge of all of this stuff. You did again with Revolver News. You've done so much about this. It's been a little over 2 weeks, and it's almost gone. I mean, what questions do we still have to have answered about this assassination attempt? I mean, if this was the other way, if this was against, a Democrat or an Obama, even a former president, like this wouldn't just be able to get out of the news. They wouldn't just be able to move on. It's like, oh, Kamala Harris, first woman ever. Let's just forget that happened a week ago. Right. What are you looking at as it relates to this? Because it was interesting watching even the congressional testimony. Even the Democrats were like, Jesus, like, come on. Even the Democrats were like, this is not acceptable. And it was a rare moment of unity in Congress because of the sheer level of incompetence, gross negligence, or just outright lies.
Absolutely. Well, there are a number of things, and I'd like to point out a number of circumstances. And as we go deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, and as you suggest earlier, there are pretty striking and damning parallels to an instance of January 6th Fedsurrection hoax, namely the pipe bomb issue. And ultimately, I want to arrive at those parallels because this is the most important and potentially explosive story in the country because it implicates not only the Secret Service, which we have a lot of questions about for July 13, but also Kamala Harris, who is now the presumptive nominee for the Democrats. So let's just start with the basic facts of July 13, because, if it's one issue of incompetence, we can kind of write it off as, okay, we're in a system of, total systemic collapse of complex systems. We can't really expect competence anywhere anymore, unfortunately. We can write it off. But when you have one thing after another, the threshold for chalking it off to simple incompetence becomes more and more difficult. Okay, number one, everyone asks, but we can't let it go. How is the guy able to get up on that roof in the first place? How is that even possible? You get up on the roof and it's 100 some yards away from where the president's speaking, direct line of sight. We now know they had people in the adjacent buildings with windows with a line of sight to where the shooter was. You had members of the crowd pointing out the threat well in advance. And so, number one, how in the world could he have possibly gone up there? And two, once everybody in the crowd, everyone was alerting to this threat, why didn't they take Trump off the stage immediately? Why were their communication systems sort of uniquely non-functional that day? Why did they have no aerial surveillance on that day? If it's just one thing, then maybe you could chalk it up. But when these things compound on top of each other, it forces us and compels us to confront the possibility, the darkest possibilities. And then we look at the broader context of things. I think the timing is interesting. It's circumstantial, but it helps to compound our suspicion. How many rallies has Trump given without incident? There is that one time where someone rushed the stage, but that resembled something normal. Like that's what you'd expect to see, the reaction. Okay, sometimes people run up on the stage. It's not ideal, but that's kind of the stuff that happens if you do hundreds and hundreds of rallies, unlike Butler. But other than that, how many rallies has he had without incident? And then all of a sudden, this narrowly missed assassination attempt occurs in this critical time window from one, the Democrats have their holy crap panic moment after Biden's debate performance, and two, before Trump named his vice presidential nominee, which he made a great choice on that, incidentally, but before he named the nominee. So God forbid, again, it's so horrible to even think about, but if it had been successful, it would have been a position where there's no named VP who would be the obvious successor. It would be a total blank slate situation for the operatives behind the scene to shove whoever they want down your throat, maybe someone like Nikki Haley, maybe some other establishment favorite, and they would gladly let someone like that beat Biden.
Well,
And that would be the end of the story.
yeah. And then a week later, Biden drops out after, I mean, that morning.
Exactly.
His co-campaign co-chair is on TV saying, no, we're not going anywhere. It's great. Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. I mean, I saw the picture, of the family sitting there like, oh no, the grift is over while he's giving this speech. But that doesn't seem like it's coincidental either. I mean, like you said, if it was one lapse of judgment, hey, the local cop was assigned to this, but he's MAGA and he started paying attention to the rally, and there was the one lapse. But when you have lapse after lapse after lapse, and I've had a Secret Service detail, and I know how thorough they are, and I've been around my father's detail, which is even more thorough, and I know this cannot freaking happen. It's literally a statistical impossibility. You cannot
It's an impossibility
and get heads 10,000 times in a row, because that's what this is. And then you pointed out right before the convention where they'd get the slate, right before he'd ever named a potential VP. So that person wouldn't be, sort of shoved in there like Kamala Harris was.
Right.
A week later, Joe Biden, after everyone tells us he's great, he's wonderful. We're just kidding. It's not health though, Darren. It's not about health. It's like, so wait, you rigged the primary. You don't think you can win. So they just pull him and disregard the will of about 14 million Democrat primary voters across the country. I mean, this does not scream of the democracy that they like to preach so staunchly about, because you don't actually.
And it really, this fetish of this term democracy, by which they mean basically whatever they want to do to hold on to power. It's really interesting, by the way. I think Julie Kelly pointed this out. It's a great observation. Why are they so wedded to using the term democracy instead of country?
Yeah.
Everything's an attack on the democracy. They're reluctant to use the word country for some reason. But just briefly, back to the assassination attempt, some other things. So first of all, as you point out, statistical impossibility, improbability, infinitesimally improbable. And let's say that the infinitesimally improbable actually occurred. How was there this guy who just happened to be positioned to take advantage of that? Why would he assume, let's say you're a would-be shooter. Why would you assume, even if there's no one on that roof, you see there's an adjacent building with people in the window, you've got to assume that there's aerial surveillance. Why wouldn't you assume that once you get on the third rung of that ladder tops, you're not going to get your head blown off immediately? Yeah. Why it seemed like there was this guy who's perfectly positioned to take advantage of something that is so infinitesimally improbable that I find
20 minutes. They know about it for 20 minutes. It's not like there's doubt, like, hey, it's a kid on a roof, we're not sure. It's like, hey, there's a guy with a rangefinder. Oh, now we see him on a roof. He's with a rifle. Oh, Trump's not even on the stage yet. Let's put him on. And 11 minutes later, the firing starts. I mean, that screams of anything other than, hey, a little forgotten things. And again, I know a lot of these guys on the Secret Service counter sniper team. I've shot with them. I came from like a long range competitive shooting background. Like these guys are skilled shooters. That's like this doesn't happen if they're not either told to stand down or told to avoid something or whatever it may be. Like I hope there's some whistleblowers that step up about this.
And unfortunately, they lost the radio communications.
Yeah, magically, right? Like again, a level of coincidence that's just not impossible. Like if you've been watching anything for the last 8 years, you can't believe it. But you guys actually also had some sort of reporting about this mysterious ATF agent, meaning Revolver News covered this, who appears to have gotten involved in the investigation, but then magically he's gone. It's like the South Park episode. It's like, it's gone. What can you tell us about that? Because again, I'd like to see some of these whistleblowers. I'd like to see some of the people that were there speak up about it, because I know there's some great patriots in there. I'm not saying that everyone's in on it, but it does seem like it ain't just a coincidence.
Absolutely. No, now we begin to go deeper into the rabbit hole. And I just like to point out, let's look at the agency. It's weird that given that Biden and Kamala and basically the Democrat talking point about Trump has been, he's an existential threat to democracy. He incited the worst domestic terrorist attack since the Civil War, since 9/11. That's their
Uh-huh.
position, as ridiculous as it is. So the people with that position, up to and including Biden, the president, are formally in charge of the level of security that this alleged, from their point of view, threat to democracy has. That's a very weird dynamic in and of itself. And when you add to that the fact that the Secret Service is housed within the Department of Homeland Security, the most aggressively weaponized, corrupt, and politicized agency in all of the government.
Yeah.
They house the Disinformation Governance Board. They've been the tip of the spear when it comes to attacking, arresting, going after MAGA. The DHS, in fact, the DHS's point man in Congress has been Benny Thompson, who was the head of the Homeland Security Committee in Congress for 7, 8 times. He's their stooge in Congress. He's the guy who not only led the disgraced January 6th committee, but he's the person who infamously has called for Trump's Secret Service to be withdrawn entirely on account of these sham convictions.
Didn't his staffer put out something like to the effect of, it's such a shame they missed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So when you look at the agency level, the fact that the DHS, which has identified quote unquote white supremacy as the #1 national security threat, by which they mean MAGA, by which they mean any normal person who doesn't like the idea of having 8.5 million dangerous illegal immigrants coming through the border, who doesn't like squatters' rights that Kamala supports, who doesn't like the idea that criminals can go and ransack stores with impunity while people get arrested and thrown in jail for exercising their basic free speech rights, like Doug Mackey, who got arrested for a meme. Ordinary people don't like that. Yeah. But those are the people that, according to the DHS, are the #1 national security threat. Again, and the DHS houses the Secret Service. So one thing that we've been on, and this will connect to the ATF agent, we've been on for a long time, the corruption of the Secret Service. And the paramount example, if your listeners haven't heard about this, listen carefully, because this is astonishing and this is the most important story in the country, and will develop into that. It will be increasingly clear. Another instance of the Secret Service failing 1, 2, 3 times in a way that's incomprehensible, and that's the J6 pipe bomb. Long story short, we have surveillance footage that came out and we covered it extensively. It was a big scandal. When you saw the Capitol Police ununiformed officer alert Kamala Harris's Secret Service detail outside of the DNC building, alerted the detail to the existence of this pipe bomb right outside the DNC, Kamala Harris's Secret Service detail had the most astonishing reaction imaginable. And everyone could go to revolver.news and look at our piece and watch this surveillance footage for themselves. Go to YouTube, it's everywhere. The Secret Service detail stay in their car for over a minute, whereupon they get out of the car and act in the most lackadaisical fashion imaginable, like they don't have a concern in the world. And then the cherry on top, the big scandal that's obvious to anyone who watches the video, they allow a group of school children to cross the street right in the direction of where this pipe bomb is and walk right by the pipe bomb. Only minutes later to go through the spectacle of having a bomb-safe robot defuse this pipe bomb. So it's very clear from this egregious behavior of Kamala Harris's Secret Service detail that either they don't care for their lives, they don't care for their protectees' lives, and they're perfectly fine with having a group of school children potentially blown up by a pipe bomb, or they happen to know that that pipe bomb was fake in advance, which brings up the question, how in the world would they have known that this pipe bomb was fake? Keep in mind, this was the very same pipe bomb that was miraculously discovered in perfect synchronicity to the Ray Epps breach on the Capitol. They initially swept that area when Kamala Harris arrived at the DNC at around 11 a.m. And they missed it. And they missed it with the dogs, with everything. It's right out there in the open. Somehow they missed it. It's like an interesting parallel. You can miss a pipe bomb right in front of you, and you can miss the shooter right on a roof 150 yards away. So they conveniently miss it then, because it's critical to note, if they had discovered the pipe bomb at 11 a.m., that would have foiled the whole thing, because they'd say, oh my God, there are bombs here. There would be beefed up security, and the whole operation wouldn't unfold the way that it did.
Yeah.
They had to have missed the bomb in the morning so that the bombs could be coincidentally discovered right at as the attack on the Capitol was unfolding. And their official excuse, there's a congressional report out, one of the interviews with one of the officials saying they had tons of bike racks that they wanted to use to supplement security where that initial breach location was, but they couldn't bring the bike racks there because the pipe bombs had been discovered and that blocked the way. That was the excuse. The pipe bombs diverted resources away from that initial breach point, and that's how, Ray Epps and company got away with it. So the timing there was critical. And you see from the surveillance footage that the same Secret Service detail who somehow missed this bomb knew when it was discovered at the exact time it had to be discovered to have this diversion effect. They knew when it was discovered that it was fake. How did they know that? This is Kamala Harris's Secret Service detail. And now to tie it all together here, Kamala Harris. Look, the Democrats, Kamala Harris included, have for over 3 years done everything they can to shove down our throats this idea that January 6th was a domestic terrorist attack. The worst, deadly. They've lied repeatedly. They lied about Brian Sicknick getting bludgeoned to death by a MAGA mob. They had to correct that after we reported on it. So they've lied to reinforce this narrative, but the Kamala Harris thing, they didn't actually have to lie about.
Yeah.
She was in that building as the pipe bomb was there and discovered and removed. So here's the big question. Here's the trillion-dollar question. Why would Kamala Harris, the most politically opportunistic creature on earth, not milk the living hell out of the fact that she came within a hair's width of losing her life to this pipe bomb? Why not a word about it? Shouldn't this be the Democrats' #1 talking point about January 6th? And instead, it's their most carefully guarded secret. Especially now, she's the presumptive nominee. Why wouldn't she balance it out and say, yes, Trump almost lost his life to a political assassination attempt, but I too almost lost my life to a political assassination.
I'm sure she will now, but it's nonsense. But to your point, it's almost like the pipe bomb was designed to be like if they didn't breach the Capitol and if they didn't get the narrative that they wanted, and if the media didn't run with it, it was like the backup plan. And again, whether we're talking about the shooting, whether we're talking about bomb sniffing dogs, I've gone and I got in the bite suit with both the attack dogs, and I watched at their training facility. The Secret Service has probably the best sort of canine program in the world for this sort of thing. Like, those dogs don't miss a pipe bomb, I can assure you, because I've seen them train at their facility. I've been more impressed with the dogs than I probably have any human level of training that you could ever imagine. Like, they ain't missing a pipe bomb under a bench when they're 6 inches away. It's literally impossible. No, I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm not one of these guys, armchair warrior who became an expert on Secret Service. Like, I had a detail for 4 years. I've been around my father's detail for 9 years. I'm friends with a lot of the guys. I've trained with them. The counter snipers, I've trained CQB stuff with them. I've been in the dogs. I've seen it all. I understand exactly the level of capability. And let's just say that doesn't get missed ever.
But think about this. It's not just that they missed it when they had to miss it for the synchronization to happen. When the pipe bomb was randomly discovered, again, at the exact minute it had to be discovered, and they were informed of the bomb, they stood around and did nothing and let a group of school children walk right by it. That doesn't seem to be consistent with typical Secret Service protocol either. And again, the fact that Kamala Harris hasn't been milking this politically, she to this day has not publicly acknowledged that she was in the DNC building when the pipe bomb was there. So how dark does this secret have to be for her to not talk about this publicly at all? Now, here's where the ATF stuff comes in, because it gets really wild. So when this surveillance footage came out, And the people who were paying attention were really scandalized by it, because even if you don't draw the obvious and dark conclusions that the pipe bomb thing was a setup and the Secret Service was likely in on it to some degree in that case, at least for detail, not the entire Secret Service. But even if you don't go that far, the simple fact that the Secret Service detail allowed a group of children to walk right by it is alone and uncontroversially scandalous. That, on its face, as a separate matter, is scandalous. So there was a closed door meeting that included some of the people on the ground on the scene at the pipe bomb's discovery who were part of that initial response. ATF led the response. Then a guy named Ashton Benedict, who is a special agent in charge of DC, the ATF, he ran the pipe bomb first response. Now, his career trajectory has been interesting. He moved from a 25-year career at the ATF, where he oversaw the pipe bomb response, to a brief stint at Metro PD. The DC mayor put him as the head of Metro PD, and then he shuffled over to the Capitol Police, where he is currently the head of Dignitary Protection and Intelligence at the Capitol Police. So Ashton Benedict is there, and some of the people who were on the ground were there, and they were asked, how in the world did you not do anything? How do you stand around and let a group of school children pass by? And Ashton Benedict was there and signed off to the following response: we simply didn't want to create panic. That was their excuse for doing nothing and allowing school children to walk right by. And to think that the current head of Dignitary Protection at the Capitol subscribed to that is quite amazing. And he's, by the way, my number one suspect for cover-up guy. He's an ATF guy, which makes it interesting in light of these reports coming from Senator Ron Johnson that there was this mysterious ATF figure on site at Butler. Now, we've subsequently learned that this person was not there in any official capacity as an ATF agent. The Secret Service has acknowledged the possibility that there could have been an ATF agent present in his private capacity as a citizen attending the rally, of course. But it's very bizarre that there was indeed a guy who represented himself as an ATF agent, who had a real phone number, who requested photographs of the deceased shooter. And when Ron Johnson followed up with this guy with his number, he was ghosted, and we've never heard from the guy again.
It sort of sounds familiar. I know we've spoken in the past, year ago, about sort of the fake Gretchen Whitmer, kidnapping plot, the governor of Michigan. And, basically, a couple of meth heads were like essentially forced into pressured into, bullied into doing a fake. And there's some of these characters that get transferred and they conveniently end up in every possible spot to be a bad actor and to further sort of sow the discord that's out there. This ATF guy sounds a little bit, I forget the guy's name. That was the guy that was magically transferred to everything. And then he's heading up the investigation of the group that he was in charge of before. And it reads like a bad movie at this point, but it seems to be a recurring theme of these mysterious characters who somehow in 3 different jobs all end up in the same place, all end up investigating themselves, all, sort of corrupted and or, just guys with bad records that seemingly would be willing to do anything they can to preserve their job and or climb the ranks, even if it's a total subversion of basic law and justice. Am I the only one that's seeing this?
No, it's right. It's plain there for anyone to see that there are striking parallels between the January 6th op, specifically the pipe bomb operation, and the July 13th operation. It involves the same organization, the same manifestly corrupt and politicized organization, the Secret Service, which is housed, again, within the DHS, which is the most aggressively politicized and weaponized agency across our national security bureaucracy, run by none other than Mayorkas, the man directly responsible for flooding the country with 8.5+ million illegal immigrants. And people think, oh, these are just people, from Latin America. They're from everywhere, and they have a whole host of different motivations, some of them a lot worse than just kind of coming and, contributing to the immiseration of the American working class. Some of them have even more malicious motives than that. And so maybe that's something that Biden or Kamala should think about before we continue putting them up in, 5-star luxury hotels in New York City. It's really, the degree to which this stuff is connected by the agency, by the networks. These parallels are very dark, and we've gone on this for a while. So just suffice it to say that we have to confront the dark possibility that there's a non-negligible chance. We're not saying for sure. People are incompetent. There's always a chance that it's just incompetence, but there's a non-negligible chance that elements of the federal government, including elements of the Secret Service, were somehow in on what happened in Butler, a non-negligible chance. And that alone should be a very sobering fact. It's not just, fantasy commentariat stuff. This is real, and we all saw it in front of our eyes. And despite the kind of phantasmagoria of the news cycle, the vicissitudes of, one thing after another, it's too important to move on from that until we get to the truth, wherever it leads.
Yeah, and that's not just you and I, talking about this, me being a pissed off son. Like the amount of guys that I know in sort of that, let's call it like the operator community, guys that are Rangers, SEALs, Delta. I have friends, British SAS guys being like, hey, man, I want to work your dad's security because that didn't happen by chance. Like, and not one of those guys who have worked these kinds of details, who have done, protection at the highest level, whether it be agency type stuff or the highest level within the teams. But like, it doesn't get higher than Delta and British SAS. And if those guys are reaching out to me being like, hey, man, you got to do something about this because like, I'm like, I don't even know how to get like, how do you do that? You're protected by the government, the Secret Service. It's complicated, but to a T, guys that I know that are the highest level operators in the world have reached out to me like, that ain't right. That didn't just happen. We got to do something about it. Let me know how I can help.
Right. No, it's clear they tried. They narrowly avoided success. It was a narrow miss, and it's just miraculous and terrifying at the same time to consider the implications of that. Now it seems that the system has got a breath of new life, and they're doing a full court media press for Kamala. So maybe, the silver lining of that might be now that they're focusing on full spectrum propaganda for Kamala, they'll turn away from the darker extracurricular approaches they might have done in Butler and just focus on rigging the system through nonstop positive propaganda media coverage. It's really amazing to see the same media that went on one hand from you're an extremist if you question Biden's cognitive state to, oh my God, Biden can't, basically string together a sentence where this is panic mode. The media briefly turned against a Democrat president, but really it seemed like they were doing that on behalf of Obama. Then they got their way, pushed him out, and now it's this astonishing full court press where the same people are telling you that Biden was great and healthy and he could win at 20 simultaneous chess games in his head. He was just so sharp, but he was only sharp behind closed doors, guys. He was sharp with his
10 and 4. Between 10 and 4 there. But yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, tell it, like, what do we need to know about the Kamala Harris candidacy that the legacy media will never tell us? Because there seems to be a lot. I'm watching I'm watching individual reporters that talked about her being the border czar a couple of years ago. Are like, that was never the case. She was never the border czar. I've never seen anything like it. It's a complete role reversal. For the first time in at least recent memory for me, they were actually honest brokers about Joe Biden for like a few short-lived weeks. And then it was like, okay, we flipped them out. So now we're going to lie about the legacy, history, policy, everything of Kamala Harris because, they're going to go back to full propaganda mode. It was literally the one time they were honest the way they were finally being about Biden. And now that he's out, it's like the propaganda machine is back and churning, working for the Democrat Party 100%.
Absolutely. And of course, when they're honest, there's always some fairly obvious ulterior motive. Like they eventually, came around on the origins of COVID, but that's when it was too late. But I think unlike the COVID thing, there should be at least a degree of cognitive dissonance in your electorate that may not lean toward Trump, maybe even people who typically lean to Democrats, because they saw from their own media people finally acknowledging that they'd been lying on an issue very important to Democrat voters, namely Biden's cognitive health. So I hope at least some of these people are able to see, well, maybe I can't trust the people when they say Kamala Harris is the most qualified and will deliver for the average American person, will deliver for the workers, will fix our roads, will clean up the schools, will take care of the crime problem, will take care of inflation. Maybe when they say that Kamala Harris is the person to do this, I should second guess that, because these were exactly the people misleading me about Biden until like a month ago. I hope they'll ask that. And they're trying to go for this approach of calling people extremists. Is it extreme to find it weird that they're letting 8.5 million people into the country without questioning who they are, without any controls whatsoever? Is it extreme to find it weird and frankly offensive that they're putting up these people, these foreigners who come in illegally at the best hotels in New York while we have veterans sitting on the street? Is it extreme? Is it extreme to look at the fact that, this is another thing people aren't talking about. Biden had a $1 trillion infrastructure bill. And one of the great things that Trump's always talked about is he's pointed out how crumbling our roads are, the airports, the conditions of these things. What is Biden, Buttigieg, Kamala, what have they done in terms of fixing the infrastructure? We just had a major collapse in the cybersecurity infrastructure with this Microsoft CrowdStrike thing. We've seen, Elon's talked about it and he's chastised the Microsoft CEO for it. But irrespective of how culpable Microsoft is for that specific event, and I think there is culpability, but it underscores just how ubiquitous their systems are. Microsoft is very close with Kamala. You see a lot of tech people shifting over to Trump. Microsoft is one of the few sticking with Kamala, and they're some of the most egregious when it comes to embedding censorship in their software. And also now we see cybersecurity. Few people know this. Microsoft Word actually has in its terms of service that they're allowed to monitor the things that you write in Microsoft Word for hate speech. It's like very weird. And our government
Let me guess,
systems,
they are the arbiters of who's writing hate speech.
And our government systems use the Microsoft computer. So that's very strange. The infrastructure is crumbling. Is it extreme to want to fix that? Is it extreme? Look at Kamala Harris's record in the Senate such that it is. Every single thing is this extremely bizarre pet project that is totally out of touch with the average American. There's like 2 or 3 proposals that are designed to reinforce squatters' rights. That's what we really need in the country, is to strengthen squatters' rights, to strengthen the ability of criminals to go after cops. It's like this stuff is so out of touch that it really, I find it incredible that they're trying to paint the average American who looks at all of these things that the Biden-Kamala regime has done to drive our country into the ground. And anyone who questions that apparently is an extremist. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, they're doing the cleanup. They're trying to rewrite history about her being the border czar. They're literally trying to pretend something that's been said like 10,000 times never happened. I got fact checked by like USA Today or Newsweek or one of these because I posted like, she owns that. That's hers. Miraculously, I got the fact check off because they couldn't pretend, but it didn't stop people from wondering like, hey, is that wrong? They're lying about her being ranked the most liberal U.S. senator. I mean, that's a fact. She is a radical leftist. She's not going to be a moderate. They tried selling us that Joe Biden was a moderate. That was a lie because he'd sign whatever she or one of the other radicals in the administration would put in front of him. This is going to be a propaganda like we've never seen over the next 100 days. What else are you expecting from it? Because I imagine it gets significantly worse.
I'm looking at the optics of this, and they're really playing up the idea of, Kamala, she's the fun person, she's dancing around this or that. And there's nothing in and of itself wrong with that. But if you're failing to the degree that they're failing, and if average Americans are struggling to the degree that they're struggling, it just what's the point? How about you succeed and deliver on inflation? How about you succeed and give us clean, functioning roads and airports?
Yeah.
How about you succeed and not get us rob the taxpayer of hundreds of billions of dollars to keep this pointless war in Ukraine in continuation? How about you fix those things?
Yeah.
And then you can dance and have fun, because it's just, I think it's so out of touch that they do that and, point to the average American who says, why can't anyone fix these basic things? And that person is the extremist. And they're whitewashing the record. The farthest left senator is trying to portray someone who just thinks inflation has got out of control as an extremist. And it's ridiculous, and it's consistent with the pattern of lies. I think it really needs to be driven home. The same media who told you for years that Biden was cognitively healthy is telling you this. The same media that's told you for years that Biden was cognitively healthy is telling you that. It manifests.
He did that, though, too. I mean, as vice president, no, Joe's 100% in charge. He's 100% leading the way. He's 100% this. Now I'm going to take over. I mean, shouldn't there be some accountability to her? I mean, you obviously, I don't think there's any level of disdain that you could have for the media that is enough these days. But, as it relates to her, for 3.5, almost 4 years, she's been lying to the American public about Joe Biden's competency, about his ability to lead, about how vibrant and energetic he is. And then one day, all of a sudden, that's not the case, even though his own campaign people that morning were saying, no, he's in this forever. What are you talking about? We don't even know. I mean, it's clear he was forced into this, but it's also clear that she lied to the American public because they didn't care, because whoever was doing the bidding was still signing these things, and they just use him like a useful idiot, and they parade him out there, I guess, because he could lie and say he's the blue collar guy from Scranton. I mean, it's such nonsense, but doesn't she deserve some accountability as it relates to lying to the American public for so long about something so flagrantly bad? I mean, that to me is a real threat to democracy. I mean, the guy that's duly elected to be president of the United States is not able to function at even a reasonable level. And they're telling us he's great. He'll be the guy that'll fix things when, something bad happens at 3 o'clock in the morning. Nope. I'm sorry, guys. No, it's only between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. that he's functioning. But, he kind of reasonably functions during that period of time. Isn't that enough? I mean, our enemies will take that into consideration, and they'll go easy on us, outside of that 6-hour window of competence, right? I mean, it's insane.
Right. No, it's a total betrayal of trust on the part of media, on the part of Kamala Harris, on the part of the Democrat establishment, that they would perform basically the very definition of gaslighting, which is to insult the American people by denying what they all saw right in front of their faces.
Yeah.
And again, people who are capable of that level of deception, that level of contempt for the American people, and who combine that contempt with an unfathomable level of incompetence, such that the dollar is crumbling. People are getting inflated out of whatever station they're in. The middle class is getting inflated down to the poor, and the poor people are getting inflated down even further. Everything is failing, from foreign policy to the economy to the basic conditions of living in a healthy society, the basic conditions of being safe on the streets, the basic conditions of having a country as such, which is predicated on the notion of some kind of border control, which we simply don't have now. And the media can deny the terminology of borders are, even though they're all on record as having used that term. But this was within Kamala's purview. And this is arguably the most disastrous component of the most disastrous presidency we've had in recent history, if not ever. So it just looks so bad. And, with Kamala, the transition to this, it's almost like we've lost a certain degree of innocence and honesty. Because for all that we can say about Joe Biden, who, there's an interesting kind of transparency to his presidency in the following sense. And that is, it's so manifestly obvious given his condition that he's not running anything.
Yeah.
It's so manifestly obvious that the way that the system is supposed to work is that any person in a suit is interchangeable with any other, because the system goes the way it goes, irrespective of who's sitting in that resolute desk. And it really, like, that specific kind of transparency contrasts profoundly with the transparency afforded by Donald Trump, who is quite the opposite in the sense that he's been totally independent of the system. When he came in 2016, he wasn't dependent on the system, so he could expose it in a very different way. He could talk about it. He could act independently about it. He could flout the orthodoxies of the system because he wasn't controlled by it. Whereas because Biden was so obviously controlled by it, that also gave us a glimpse into how the system really works. And, one really interesting thing about President Trump, one of the great things about him, there are many, is that he is one of the few, if not the only person in the political arena who is not interchangeable. Yeah. He's not interchangeable because it's not just about, anybody can read a script, anybody can even read a script and the script says things that people want to hear. It can have the right talking points. It can have the right policy prescriptions or this or that. But at the end of the day, real leadership is not about reading the right script. The system can change out one person from the other. Trump is not interchangeable because of his direct connection with the American people and his leadership. And that transcends policy. It transcends the script. It transcends talking points, anything else. A leader who has the kind of instincts of what happened in Butler, who gets up and, puts his fist up and fight, that's not interchangeable. And that harkens to a more human and more elevated style of politics where you have real people and not this kind of impersonal, distant system that is independent of whoever nominally runs it and is seemingly on autopilot to drive average American people further into the dirt and to further elevate the power and the purse of the corrupt ruling class who run the country.
I mean, I could not have said it even close to as well. So, Darren, thank you very much, guys. Make sure you guys check out Revolver News. Darren's been on the front line of these things. He's willing to ask the questions and follow those things way down the rabbit hole. But, man, he's asking good questions everyone in the media should be asking and are not. Also, follow him on social. Check out everything he says. Darren, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it, as always.
Thank you so much, Don.
Okay, guys, thanks so much for that. Darren, that was great. Always a crowd favorite with that. Make sure you guys are liking, sharing, and subscribing. Make sure you're downloading the Rumble app so you can do this. Download the Rumble app even on your big screen and your smart TV. If you get your podcasts different ways or you know friends that do, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. Make sure guys are checking it out. Make sure you're spreading this message. This is how we beat the narrative. This is how we get through the mainstream media. So smash that like button, send it to your friends, check out Triggered in all its other forms, and we will see you guys soon. Have a good one.